morning, students. I hope you all are doing good and I hope your preparation is going fine. Welcome to the Analyst. This is 14th of October 2023 and we are here to discuss important articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, the handout for this session is there in the description box. You can use it to streamline your current affairs preparation. Now, let us see the table of contents. So, the first important topic of today is related to exports and trade deficit, which is in The Hindu page number 1. Second important topic is India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. The third topic is related to World Bank Group. And the fourth topic is related to a referendum, that is Indigenous voice referendum in Australia. And the last topic is related to the Global Hunger Index. And especially we will be focusing on the causes and the reasons for India's dismal performance in the Global Hunger Index and various other issues related to it. So let's start with the first topic. It is related to the exports and trade deficit. Now, why this is in news is that India's goods exports have been dipped for the 7th time in the last 8 months, which is why India's export sector, India's external sector and trade deficit is a cause of concern for us. Now, why it is important? For your GS paper 3, Indian economy, this export, external sector and trade deficit becomes very, very important. Now let us study about exports and trade deficit. So essentially you have to understand what is the external sector. See, there are two sectors. First is the domestic sector. Second is the external sector. Now, external sector involves India's economic relationship with the foreign countries. That is with the other countries, with the rest of the world. So if economic relations of India with the other countries are made in the form of accounting, it is also known as your balance of payment. And since you know India is an open economy, that is India is globalized, India has integrated with the outside world, with the rest of the world. So this exports and trade deficit becomes very, very important for us. And essentially when we talk about trade, we talk about two things. One is imports, one is exports. Now imports are the goods and services which come into our country. Exports are the goods and services which goes out of our country. Very, very simple. Now, essentially now this imports and exports also, it includes two kinds. One is import-export of goods. That is the tangible items visible to you. Second is the import and export of services. That is the intangible items. For example, a doctor providing a medical service. So that is a form of service. For example, I'm teaching all of you. So it is kind of a service. So there can be import-export of goods, there can be import and export of services. Now let us focus on the current trend of exports and imports. Now this merchandise exports, it involves your goods exports only. So merchandise exports have been in total of $447 billion as of 2022-2023. All of this data is for the year 2022 to 2023. So merchandise exports, it's $447 billion. Merchandise imports is $715 billion, which tells us that our merchandise imports, that is our merchandise imports are more than the merchandise exports. Now we'll study what this phenomena is called, but essentially you have to focus on one thing, that our imports are more than the exports in merchandise, that is goods. Now let's come to the services. Our services exports are $322 billion and the services imports are $178 billion. That means service exports are more than imports. And what essentially are we exporting in services? Essentially the information and technology part. Because India is a hub of information and technology sector and we are exporting those services to the rest of the world. That is why our service export is very, very high. So when we see our service exports and imports, service export is higher than the service import. And when we see merchandise export and import, merchandise import is higher than the merchandise export. Essentially, you have to focus on these things. Now, let's look about the major export commodities of India. That is whatever we export majorly to other countries based on goods. So first is your machinery, transport and metals. Then mineral fuels, lubricants. Third is agriculture allied products. Third is chemical allied products and gems and jewelries. So all of these are the products which forms the top of the list of our exported items to the rest of the world. Now, what are our major export destinations? That is, we export majorly to which countries? First is obviously your United States of America. Second is UAE. Third is Netherlands. Then fourth is China, and fifth is Bangladesh. And this graph also you can see on your screen. It shows that overall our exports of goods have been going down. Our exports of services are okayish, they are at a stable position, but our export of goods have considerably gone down. So that is also a very major cause of concern for us. Now let's move on to a very interesting topic in it, that is your trade deficit. Now what is your trade deficit? Essentially, we saw in the previous slide, our imports of goods was more than exports. Now you have to understand one thing. Whenever we are importing the goods into our country, we are spending money, right? So expenditure is happening. But whenever we are exporting the goods, we are earning income, right? We are earning revenue. So when our imports are more than the exports, that means we are spending more than what we are earning. And is it a good thing? No, it is not. Because we need to earn more than what we are spending. So our exports should be higher, our imports should be lower, and we should be dependent on our domestic manufacturing as well. But the opposite is happening. And overall, if you see, India is having a trade deficit. Now, trade deficit means whenever your imports are more than exports. That is, whatever you are spending is more than whatever you are earning in basis of external sector. That is your trade deficit. Now, there is also a term called trade surplus. Now, trade surplus means whenever you are earning more, that is, your exports are higher than your imports. That is your trade surplus. So, as we discussed, it's a part of the balance of payment. And especially, you have to understand there are two parts of balance of payment. One is your current account, another is your capital account. So, this export import of goods and services, it comes under the current account of your balance of payment. In capital account, the transactions related to your assets and liabilities are there. So current account, exports, imports of goods and services are including there. Okay, so what we have to understand now is what are the various reasons for this higher trade deficit. Now there can be multifaceted reasons, right? But essentially we are focusing on two. That is your cyclical reasons and structural causes. First of all, let's discuss about the cyclical reasons. Rise in real income. Now let's say for a particular year, there is a rise in the per capita income, or there is rise in the real income, or there is economic growth in a particular country. That means consumerism is there. Consumers are demanding more and more because per capita income of the country has increased. Now, if they are demanding more and more, they will also import more and more products from the outside world. Now, when this is happening, it is leading to a trade deficit. So, rise in real income can be a cause, but it is cyclical. Not progressively it is happening, progressively also it can happen. But on cyclical basis, if it's happening, it is a cause of concern and it is a reason for your widening trade deficit. Then high consumer spending. Again, in relation to your rise in real income. If rise in real income per capita is there, there will be rise in consumer spending per capita as well. And if that is there, eventually the producers will also rise and up their investment spending also. If investment spending is higher, again we will require more and more products from outside. So we will import more and more products from outside. Increased production, again all of these points are related to increase in the level of economic activity. So if there is an increase in the level of economic activity, economic growth, economic development, essentially we will see that we are importing more and more products. That is, our imports then will be greater than the exports, which is why there will be a trade deficit, right? Now, coming to the structural causes, what are the various structural causes? First is lower research and development. Now, lower R&D means what? That is, we are not able to produce certain kind of goods which require heavy research and development into our country. That is why we have to depend on the other countries for our imports, right? So lower R&D is also very specific reason for the widening trade deficit. Then lower capital investment. And if lower capital investment in our country is there, again we will require the goods from the other country to fulfill the void which is there in our country. So that is why our imports will increase and our export capability is not there. Then weak productivity. Now, if productivity is weak, we will not be able to export many goods, because if productivity is weak, any which way you are not able to meet the domestic consumption, the domestic demand, which is why you will not be able to export also. So trade deficit will be there, of course. Then lack of competitive and absolute advantage. Now, competitive advantage basically comes with the economies of scale. If productivity is low, if competitive advantage is not there, if the firms are not having that much absolute advantage also in relation to the external sector, in that way also our exports cannot grow that much. And if exports can't grow, that means trade deficit will widen. Because for trade deficit to happen, you require two things. Your imports will become lower. Your imports will become higher and your exports will become lower for a trade deficit. For a trade surplus, your imports has to be lower and your export has to be higher. So you have to understand the first condition which we talked, it is related to your trade deficit. The second condition is related to your trade surplus. So this is about your reasons. Now again, import dependence. Now there are certain goods, for example, let's say semiconductor. So we are dependent for semiconductor production on other countries because our domestic capability has not been reached to its optimum. But still there are various initiatives and we are trying to improve domestic production capabilities. But still we are not that much self-sufficient and that much self-dependent on various products. That is why import dependence is there. For example, if you remember the active pharmaceutical ingredients, in that also we were import dependent. We were dependent on the imports from various countries. So in that way, if we are dependent on imports, any which way we will have to import that commodity. For example, oil, petroleum. So we are dependent on the imports. Any which way we have to import crude oil from the Middle Eastern countries. There is no other way around. So we have to reduce that import dependence ultimately to correct the trade deficit. Now let's discuss about what are the various initiatives taken by the government. First is the overall ambit or overall policy of your Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now Atmanirbhar Bharat means what? Self-sufficient and self-reliant India. That is, we will produce all the commodities in our country only. We will enhance the production levels in our country only so that we become Atmanirbhar. That is self-dependent. That is the overall policy. Now, under this policy, there are various initiatives. Okay, one is the PLI scheme, that is Production Linked Incentive Scheme. Now, it gives incentives to the producers for incremental increase in the production levels, in the domestic production levels. If incremental increase in production is there, an incentive will be provided to that producer. And ultimately, it will boost what? It will boost your exports. That is why it is essential, a good initiative by the government to reduce your trade deficit. Now the import licensing. Now if you remember a few months back, India had imposed import licensing on imports of PCs, tablets, laptops, right? So when import licensing is imposed, that means you are restricting the imports into one country. When you are restricting the imports, eventually your trade deficit problem will be solved. So that is also one of the initiatives. Now, districts as export hubs. Now, creating specific districts based on export hub model. Now, all the districts which are there in the country, basically some products will be chosen which will be specific for that district. And that district will be created as an export hub so that incremental increase in production is there. And eventually, because of that incremental increase in production, we can export that commodity to the outside world. So that is also one initiative to boost our export sector. Then Foreign Trade Policy 2023, another very important policy, which under that there are various initiatives, various guidelines in which we are able to enhance our exports, lower our imports and improve our trade deficit and move towards a condition of trade surplus in the coming future. Promotion of EVs and renewable energy. Now, I told you in this when we were discussing the structural reasons that we are heavily dependent on import of crude oil and heavily dependent on the import of petroleum. Now, if that is the case, we should find an alternative in our country. That is, we should focus more on electric vehicles, we should focus more on renewable energy, so that the dependence on import of crude oil is reduced. And eventually it will solve the problem of the trade deficit of India as well. So all of these are some of the initiatives taken by the government of India, some very prominent initiatives which will help in reduction of your trade deficit. Now, if you see this graph, this particular graph also shows you that from 2019 to 2022, there has been a considerable trade deficit in our country. But there is one year in between, that is the year of 2020, when COVID-19 was there, that is lockdown was there. At that point in time, the green area which is shown here, our country showed a trade surplus. That is, we were exporting more than we were importing. So that is the only period of time in the last many years where India has shown a trade surplus, right? So this is about your exports and trade deficit. Now let's move on to the second topic, that is India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Now, our finance minister has said that the conflict in Israel and Palestine, which is currently ongoing, will not dampen the plans for IMEC, that is Indian Middle East European Corridor. So, it will not be impacted because of this conflict between Israel and Palestine, which is ongoing. Now, why it is important for a syllabus? Again, our General Studies Paper 2 International Relations and General Studies Paper 3 Indian Economy, this portion is very important. So let's discuss what is this IMEA. So this India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, this agreement for it was signed in the G20 summit which happened in New Delhi in 2023. Very prominent summit, and we have covered it in the analyst as well. So this IMEC, now it is a part of PGII. Now what is this PGII? Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. Now, it is an initiative under the ambit of your G7, PGII, that is Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. And what is the main motto for it? Main motto is to ensure value-driven, high-impact, transparent infrastructural partnership in the entire world, especially in the developing and lower developing countries as well. So basically focusing on value-driven, high impact and transparent infrastructure partnership. Okay, so what all things this IMEC will consist of? Now before seeing that, let us see how IMEC looks like. So this is your India, this is the port of Mumbai, this is the port of Mundra, right? And this is the connecting line to the Middle East region. Now this is the Middle East region where the connectivity is shown. And eventually now you see Middle East is getting connected to the region of Europe. So basically we see there are two kind of corridors. That is, one is the Eastern Corridor connecting India to the Arabian Gulf, and another is the Northern Corridor. That is this corridor which is connecting the Gulf to the European region. This is how your IMEC will go on. But what this IMEC will entail, what this corridor will have, corridor will basically have your railroad connection, ships to rail network, your port connection and road transport connection. So all of these connections will be part of this corridor. And what other things? There will be electricity cables as well, which can be used in this corridor. A hydrogen pipeline will also be made, and also high-speed data cable will also be ensured in this India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. So this is about the corridor. Now, another important information about this corridor, who all are the signatories? India, of course, is a signatory. Then your United States, Saudi Arabia, UAE, European Union, Italy, France, and Germany. So all these countries and European Union is a part of this IMEC. And now, as you see, Eastern Corridor is very much highlighted here, and the Northern Corridor is also very much highlighted in the map which is visible in front of you. Now, what is the significance? That is very important for us to understand. That what is the significance of this IMEC? First is that it will create a comprehensive logistical transportation network, of course. Because if railroads are there, railway networks are there, port connectivity is there, of course, a comprehensive logistical and transportation network will be created. That is a very important significance. Then it will enhance the efficiency and reduce the cost. So when it enhances the connectivity, obviously the efficiency of production, the efficiency of logistics will improve, and it will lower the cost of logistics and transportation as well. That is very important perspective. Then integration of Asia, Europe and Middle East. That is the most important thing. That it will integrate economically also, physically also, your Asia, Europe and Middle Eastern region. And it will also boost economic growth in the region if connectivity is there. Logistic wise, all the countries are improving. Data pipelines are there, hydrogen pipelines are there. If so many things are there, economic growth of the region is bound to happen. So that is also a very important thing. Countering China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, you know that China's Belt and Road Initiative is a direct threat to our territorial sovereignty and integrity. That is why we do not support this Belt and Road Initiative. Now, to counter this Belt and Road Initiative, India is having its own infrastructural plan, which is global in nature. So, it will directly counter the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and it will also break the Pakistan's veto when Pakistan uses its territory and roadblocks the connectivity of India with the Middle Eastern region, because Pakistan basically does not allow us to connect to the Afghanistan region, connect us to the Middle Eastern region, because Pakistan is having various roadblocks in between. Now, because of this corridor, that problem will also be solved. India's strategic engagement with the Arabian Peninsula. Now, Middle Eastern region, the Arabian Peninsula is very strategically very important for our country. Geopolitically, strategically, economically, culturally and socially also. This Arabian Peninsula is very important, which is why India's strategic engagement based on strategic issues, partnership like your infrastructure, if it's there, obviously it is good for our country, good for our foreign policy, good for our domestic economy as well. Infrastructure development. Now, this is a common point that if all these things are happening, ultimately what is there? Ultimately, infrastructure in the world, especially in this region, is developing. So, infrastructure development is taking place. Now, this is about your IMEC. Now, let's move to the third topic. It's related to your World Bank group. Now, what has happened is the World Bank and many other multilateral development banks, they're planning to collaborate amongst themselves. And why? What is the reason for collaboration? They want to accelerate the vision of livable planet, which is free of poverty. So based on that vision, World Bank and various other multilateral development banks are going to collaborate. Again, it is important for your General Studies Paper 3, Indian Economy. Now let us see, what is this World Bank Group all about? Now, World Bank Group is essentially a combination of two organizations. That is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and International Development Association. Now, what are the various activities in which this World Bank is focused upon, right? See, World Bank Group is a group of various other small organizations, international organizations. We'll study in the next slide what are those organizations. But when we talk about the word World Bank, we essentially mean two organizations, that is your IBRD and IDA, that is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and International Development Agency. Now, what are the various activities in which this World Bank is focused upon? First of all, the World Bank is focused on developing countries. So, activities focused on developing countries. And what kind of activities? In relation to your human development, in relation to agriculture, rural development, eradication of poverty, environmental protection, infrastructural development, ensuring good governance, and better healthcare facilities in the developing countries. That is the major focus of World Bank. Now, what it does, it provides loans for specific projects. It is important. So, if a country is having a wider policy change, a wider policy in which fundamental changes are happening, World Bank will provide various loans. It will lend money to them for the specific projects which are often linked to the wider policy changes. Now, who usually becomes the president of World Bank? Conventionally, it is an American citizen. Currently, it is Ajay Banga, who is a person of Indian origin but an American citizen. So, normally, US only nominates the president of your World Bank. Now, it is very important. Membership. So, you can only become a member of the World Bank if you are a member of IMF. If a country is member of International Monetary Fund, then only that country will become a member of your World Bank. That is very, very important for us to know. Now, World Bank Group reports. Now, these reports are very, very important for your preliminary examination. See, because some of the reports many of you know, but there are many reports in this which many of the aspirants do not know. So, first is the Commodity Markets Outlook. That is one report which is published by the World Bank, consists of various outlooks related to the commodity markets based on various commodities, what are the various prices of the commodities in the international market. Ease of Doing Business report, a very famous report, again published by World Bank. Global Economic Prospectus, again a very famous report published by the World Bank. Global Financial Development Report. Now don't confuse it with your Global Financial Stability Report, because this Global Financial Stability Report is published by IMF. But this Global Financial Development Report, it is published by your World Bank. Then International Debt Statistics, again published by World Bank. Poverty and Shared Prosperity Report, again a very famous report, again published by your World Bank. And then World Development Reports, based on various sectors, World Development Reports are published also by the World Bank. Now let us see in this World Bank group what all organizations are there and what are their primary functions. First, as we discussed, is the IBRD, that is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, what is the main aim of this IBRD? It lends money to middle income and developing countries. So, middle income developing countries, IBRD offers loans to them. For what? It provides funds and concessional loans for infrastructure development, educational empowerment, environmental and energy safeguards, then improvement in healthcare, water and sanitation aspects. These are the various issues for which this IBRD lends money to the middle income developing countries. Now, what is this IDA? IDA is International Development Agency. Now, it provides low or no interest loans. That is the loans which this IDA provides. Usually, they are of no interest rates, or if the interest rate is there, it is very, very minimal. It is very, very low. To low income countries. To low income countries. IBRD provides to middle income countries. IDA provides to low income countries. It was formed in the year 1960. And one very important fact for your prelims, that IBRD's membership is essential to become a member of your IDA, that is International Development Agency. So this is about your IDA. Then is IFC, that is International Financial Center. Now, why it is important? Again, to promote your private sector investments. Now, this is very important. So, it is the largest multilateral source of loan and equity financing for private sector projects. Now, in IBRD and IDA, they are essentially providing the loans to the government. But this IFC, International Finance Corporation, it is providing the funding to private sector projects. And in which countries? In developing countries. Now, yes, India is a founding member of this IFC, and it was formed in the year 1956. So, it's for the private sector projects that you have to understand. And in the developing countries. What is MIGA? That is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. So, as the name is suggesting, it's an investment guarantee agency. So, it promotes FDI, that is foreign direct investment, in the developing countries by ensuring the investor against political risk and advising the government. So, it's providing a kind of a guarantee for the investments. That is, it is providing insurance. It's ensuring the investors basically that okay, if this country is politically stable, this country is economically stable, and we are assuring you that you can invest money in that country, your money will not go in vain. So essentially promoting FDIs in various countries. And it can cover only new investments that you have to understand. That is the greenfield investments. Now again, it was formed in the year 1988, and yes, India is a member of your MIGA as well. Now coming to the last organization, that is ICSID, that is International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Now this is also very, very important organization. Again, as the name is suggesting, it's an international center for settlement of investment disputes. So it settles investment disputes between various countries. So it's a facility for conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes between the countries and individual investors, big investors. So basically, it's an arbitration center, right? International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. India is not a member of it. This is very important that India is not a member of this ICSID. Now let's move to the fourth topic, that is Indigenous Voice referendum in Australia. Now, today itself, that is October 14th, Australia will vote on a referendum based on indigenous voice. Now, what is this all about? We will discuss in the concurring slides. Why it is important? Again, General Studies Paper 2, Social Justice part, then International Relations part. This is very important. Now, first question, you have to know, what is a referendum? Now, a referendum is a kind of a direct vote in which people directly vote in a democracy. People directly vote in a democracy and direct vote by the electorate on a proposal, law, or a political issue. So, for example, if the government is there, usually people give vote to the government and government is getting elected, government takes the decision. But in a referendum, what happens is, whenever government has to take a very major decision, government poses a question to the public that this is what we want to do. You either vote yes or you either vote no. So that means you give us your mandate that should we go ahead should we go ahead with this particular issue or should we go ahead with that particular issue which is not there. So basically, to know the will of the public, that is your referendum. Now currently in Australia, a referendum is ongoing. What's the reason? What is there in the referendum? See, referendum is about whether the country's indigenous people should be formally consulted while making the laws of Australia. That is the main premise behind this referendum. What is the question which is posed to them? The question is, what is the proposed law? To alter the constitution to recognize the first peoples of Australia. This is very important. To recognize first peoples of Australia by establishing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. So establishing this particular grouping to recognize the first people of Australia, and so that they can take a part in the legal process, they can take part in the lawmaking process of the Australian country. Do you approve this proposed alteration? Now here the answer should be yes or no. And this is what a referendum will be all about. Now the question is, who are the first peoples? Because the first peoples of Australia need to be recognized. Who are the first people? First peoples are basically the indigenous inhabitants. That is the inhabitants who have been living in Australia for thousands and thousands of years. That is indigenous tribal people as well. So those people, they should be recognized and they should be given a separate voice or not. That is the main issue for this referendum. Now, these people were living in Australia before the arrival of Europeans in the 17th century. And they constitute close to 3.3% of the population in Australia. And all of them, they are basically, some common traits are there for the indigenous people, especially in Australia. One thing is that they are having poor socioeconomic conditions. Majority of them. There is lower life expectancy for them as well. Disease and infant mortality spread is also very high. Suicide rate among this inhabitants, indigenous people, is also very high. And this is the referendum, that should they be recognized or not. And should a separate, I would say, a body should be made or not. The name of the body is here, that is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Should it be made or not? That is what the referendum is all about. Now, in order for the referendum to be passed, there needs to be a double majority. That is, there should be a double majority requirement. What is the double majority? First is that more than half of the total national votes should be in favor of the amendment. That is, more than 50% vote should be in favor. Then only this amendment will be passed. Second is more than half of the voter in at least 4 states must vote in favor. So in at least 4 states in Australia, more than 50% people should vote for this referendum. So twin majority is required in order for this referendum to be passed. That is what this Indigenous voice referendum in Australia all about. Now coming to the last topic of today, it is related to your global hunger index and the reasons for the poor performance of India in this global hunger index. That what are the causes for it? Okay. Now, as you all know, and you must have studied in the last day's analyst as well, that India's performance in global hunger index 2023 is very poor. So in relation to that, we will understand the causes today. Now, it is important again your social justice part, general studies paper 3, general studies paper 2. The word hunger has been specifically mentioned. So you have to focus on that global hunger index. It's a very important topic for our mains examination. Now let us understand what is basically the problem all about. As you all know, India ranked 111th out of the 125 countries, which shows a very poor performance, very dismal performance. And as you studied in the previous analyst as well, that there are various problems with the methodological aspect of the calculation of global hunger index, right? So that is very prominent issue. But even though methodological issues are there, but we need to understand what are the problems because of which hunger is so much prevalent in our country. What are the various problems that we need to understand? So if we are talking about hunger and hunger is prevalent in our country, we are essentially talking about 4 aspects. One is your undernourishment, that nourishment is not proper to the child or to the people, child stunting, child wasting, and child mortality. So essentially we are focusing on these 4 aspects. Now what are the factors responsible? That is the main thing for us to understand. First factor is of course the poverty trap and vicious cycle of poverty. Now since many people in our country, millions of people in our country are trapped in this vicious cycle of poverty. They're not able to get out of this vicious cycle, which is why socio-economic disparity is there. And they are not able to afford good food, 3 time meals a day, and good nutritious food, which is why the problem of hunger is expanding in our country. Then hidden hunger. That means from the outside look, a person might look healthy, but inside, based on the nourishment, based on the nutrients, especially the micronutrients, maybe the person is having deficiency. Now that term we use as hidden hunger. That is micronutrient deficiency in a person. And in India, prevalence of hidden hunger is also very high. And especially among one particular gender, that is females. So because of gender inequality also in our society, because of patriarchal mindset, male dominance, we see that one particular gender is being subjugated and hunger prevalence in that particular gender, that is women, females, is very high. So that is also one of the causes. Poor governance and corruption. Now governmental schemes are there, PDS schemes are there, ration shops are there, right? Midday meal schemes are there. But because of poor implementation in several of the districts and because of corruption, this problem has more exaggerated, right? So that is also one of the cause. Population rise, inadequate awareness. Now population rise in our country is exponential, right? 1.4 billion close to we are, right? And inadequate awareness. Now see, resources in our country are limited, but since population is very high, that also becomes a challenge. And then it again increases the hunger problem and a lack of awareness because education standards are poor. That is why there is lack of awareness among the section of population as well. Protein hunger. Now specifically related to protein, which we usually get from the pulses, right? That hunger is also prevalent in our country. So protein rich diet is not there in our country and it should be there. I mean, protein rich diet is of course there, but it is not prevalent in our country that highly. That means many people are not aware that whatever they are taking, what is the nutrient quotient of that particular thing? And are they taking adequate amount of protein diet or not? See, because protein is very important for our muscles and very important for our health as well. And if protein is not there in adequate amount, ultimately the problem of hunger and undernourishment gets created. Now, the problem of climate change, and because of climate change, variability in agricultural produce, because of climate change, extreme weather events, because of that, when the production level of the crops decreases or there is a sudden natural disaster, in that cases also your hunger problem can get exaggerated. Hunger problem can basically increase. So all of these are the factors responsible for prevalence of hunger in our country. Of course, there are multitudinal other factors as well, but these are the most prominent ones. Now, what is the need of the hour? What is required? See, first thing is we need to have a social audit of all the ongoing schemes, whether be it midday meal scheme, whether be it your ration shops, your public distribution system. We need to have a social audit for it. Then we need to revamp and enhance the PDS. That is, we need to include more and more things into the public distribution system. Not just two or three things. We need to enhance the PDS system. We need to revamp its implementation so that a better implementation of PDS can happen. Reduce wastage of food. Of course, it's a very important step which needs to be taken. And a calibrated multi-stakeholder approach. That means multi-stakeholder means your population as well, that is general public, government, bureaucracy, your teachers, all the stakeholders which are there. They need to collaborate amongst themselves. They need to form, I would say, a unity amongst themselves in order to implement the schemes very, very properly. Because implementation of schemes is very proper related to reduction of hunger, obviously the problem of hunger will be solved. So this is about the global hunger index and what are the causes for India's poor performance. But again, there are questions related to the methodology of this index. That is the prominent thing which we discussed in the last analyst, right? But today we discussed about the causes. Because why hunger problem is prevalent in our country? Because it is a serious issue which needs to be addressed urgently in our country. So all the very best to all of you, and I hope you learned something new from this lecture. Have a very, very nice day and good luck for your preparation.